Party. Welcome to the Accessibility Learning Lunch and Learn. My name is Lucy Harrison. I'm an Assistant Vice Chancellor within the University System Office. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me give you kind of a brief introduction to how this session is going to go. We have 3 presentations. We're going to start off with Kim Linock, who's going to be talking about individual accessibility considerations in disability services. Then we're going to transition to Jeff Gallant and Tiffany Reardon from Affordable Learning Georgia, who will be talking specifically about accessibility and open educational resources creation. And then we're going to have a session from Jeff Linock, who's going to be talking about D2L and making technology decisions with accessibility. We are going to have a brief breakout group. We have some prompts. You will be taken away automatically to a breakout session where you'll have an opportunity to talk with some other folks about some prompts that we will provide to you. And then we'll come back for 10 to 15 minutes of wrap up and any specific questions that you may have for our speakers or that may have risen through the breakouts that you want to bring up to the group as a whole. If we may have time for a question or two at the end of each session. We're going to play that by ear. We are on a tight timeline today, though, so we maybe end up holding all of the questions for the end of the presentations here today. So let me start off by introducing Kim. Kim Linock is a disability specialist and career counselor at Georgia Highlands College. She has worked with students in a multi-campus environment for 8 years and has over 15 years experience in medical case management and teaching in higher education. This combination gives Kim a comprehensive understanding of working with individuals with a variety of disabilities. Kim regularly facilitates training on disability support services in conjunction with Georgia Highlands Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. She has made presentations at local and statewide conferences and is the past chair of the Regents Advisory Committee for Disability Services. Kim holds both a Bachelor's of Science and a Master of Social Work degrees from Florida State University, also my alma mater, go Knowles. So welcome to Kim and take it away.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm going to pull up my slides so that I may share with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My focus is going to be on individual accessibility considerations in disability services. We work with individual students to provide accommodations. So let's start by talking about what is accessibility? How is that defined? Well, according to the Office of Civil Rights, which is part of the U.S. Department of Education, when a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally integrated and equally effective manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. That definition is a mouthful, but it brings up a good point. You need to have access to information, to your courses, in order to be successful. Access is the first step. So we work in disability services toward this goal by providing direct services to students and partnering with others on accessibility needs. Direct service can involve reviewing disability documentation to verify the disability of a student and the specific needs of that individual. And then we meet with the student and others to determine reasonable accommodations using an interactive process. Then finally, we communicate approved accommodations with our faculty using a faculty accommodation notice, or a FAN as we call it. So as you can see, our mission in disability services is to facilitate physical, academic, and programmatic access for students with disabilities in higher education. So we keep hearing the word disability. What is a disability? Well, it's defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So when you look at this definition, it's important to realize that a clinical diagnosis is not synonymous with a disability. A student may have a diagnosis of ADHD or dyscalculia, but that doesn't automatically mean that they have a disability. It's the impact on that individual and the impairment that substantially limits a major life activity that determines if that diagnosis is disabling for that person. And that is what you have disability services for, to work with you on that. You don't have to do that if you're faculty or other staff. That's our role. There are a number of categories of disabilities, and I've got a list up here. I'm not going to read it to you, but there are quite a few, as you can see. So it's important to remember that a barrier for access for one person with one type of disability may be different for someone else with a different type of disability. So barriers to access are not the same for everyone. Not only do access needs vary between categories of disability, individuals within the same category may have different access needs, even though they have the same diagnosis, because they are impacted differently by that disability. Course format can make a difference with access needs, and of course, technology requirements can as well. And I'll give you a couple of examples. At the beginning of the pandemic last spring, when all of our face-to-face classes went virtual at Georgia Highlands, this created a new access need for one of my students who had severe light sensitivity. And that limited the amount of computer screen time that student could tolerate with their health issues. So when they were in a face-to-face class, that was not such an issue in the classroom. We had already obtained their free OER book online and had it printed so that the student could access it in print version. But once we went online, we needed to be able to provide printed tests for that student. So we consulted with the faculty in our testing center and came up with a solution for access. The student test was proctored virtually using Zoom, and the professor emailed the test to the student just before at the beginning of her testing time. The student printed it, and then the time clock started for the exam. And then the completed exam was scanned and sent back to the professor. So that's just one example of a barrier to access that we didn't anticipate at the beginning of the semester because circumstances changed. So I want to talk about a couple of other examples of accessible for who. And that's always a question I ask. Who is something accessible for? Well, in the first example, when I'm working with a student who is deaf, I need to think about what creates access for that student. They may need a sign language interpreter for their lecture classes, or instead of a sign language interpreter, they may actually use real-time captioning, which is something we set up virtually. So there's two different ways to access the information. I need to consult with that student to see what is going to work for that individual. But one of those methods will need to be used in most cases. And videos need to be captioned and have transcripts available. And during COVID, we need to have clear masks available for faculty and others who interact with that student so the student can see their facial expression and the nonverbal communication cues that they might miss behind a mask. So a different example is working with a student who is blind. This individual is not going to benefit from a sign language interpreter or real-time captioning to access course materials. They're going to need course materials in a digital format with screen reading software like JAWS, or the student may use Braille. Again, it's going to depend on that particular student and what method they're accustomed to accessing information with. So we need to provide those course materials in one of those formats for that student. Course materials also need to include navigation and alternate text descriptions. And of course, videos, which we normally think of as something that needs to be accessible for people who are deaf or hearing impaired, they also need to be made accessible for people who are blind. The audio descriptions are needed for any information on the screen that does not have an audio component to go with it to explain what is happening. So that's one example. Another example, and these are all examples of students and student needs that I have worked with. For students who may have a learning disability, some of them use electronic textbooks with screen reading software. However, this is point and click screen reading software, very easy to use, very easy to work with, but it is not the same software as JAWS, which is keyboard based. And this can make a difference with accessing other resources, and my partners at the presentation are going to talk more about those resources. Someone with a learning disability may also need access to instructor lecture notes or PowerPoints ahead of time to be prepared for class, and they may need things like extended time on test. Students who have an issue with mobility might need adaptive equipment, depending on if the mobility involves their upper body or not. Sometimes an alternate type of keyboard or a mouse, like a trackball mouse, is needed for someone to be able to access a computer and use that independently. I have had students who also needed text-to-speech software, like dictation software, in order to dictate their answers to a test. So in those cases, these are students who are also going to need a private testing room so that they're not talking over someone else taking the test at the same time. And then lastly, something we don't always think about is for a student who may use a wheelchair for mobility, for example, if they have a face-to-face class on an upper floor in a building, if there's an elevator malfunction, this may require class relocation in order for this student to be able to attend. So as you can see with these examples, what creates access for one student is different than what creates access for another student. And that's important to remember. Barriers to access are not the same for every student, so your solutions for access are not all going to be the same. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I hope you will have from my presentation today. We need a variety of tools, strategies, resources, and above all, teamwork to meet the needs of our individual students. One question I'm frequently asked is this particular product I want to use in my course accessible? Well, that's really not a yes or no question that I can answer because it's going to depend on several factors. So better questions to ask are, who might this product create access for and under what conditions? Some technologies work well together and some do not. For example, JAWS, which is text reading software primarily used by individuals who are blind, it's a Windows product. So if you have Mac computers on your campus, that's not going to work for that student to use. They're going to need a product that works with OS X or Mac operating systems. So I want to talk about partnerships for accessibility because that is a huge piece of what we do. Disability Services works with others on accessibility, not only within Georgia Highlands College and with community agencies, but also system-wide. And this approach of working together as a community is really important in creating access for all. Whoops, sorry, I went too far. I'll keep talking. Within GHC, one of the things that we have done to partner is recognizing that individuals and departments within each college plays different roles and provides invaluable expertise to making learning accessible for our students. I don't know everything there is to know about accessibility. I don't think any one person does, but we all play different roles and have different pieces. And that's important for us when we come together as a team. We partner frequently with faculty and do consults about individual student accommodations needed for access. We're currently partnering with our CETL to provide a series of accessibility workshops. We partner with e-learning and IT to beta test products. We've partnered with IT and the Testing Center to ensure that software products needed for access to testing is available to our students, such as text-to-speech and various screen readers. We also work with community agencies, such as Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. Sometimes they're working with a student and providing an assistive technology assessment to determine what technology is going to work best for that student to access information. They'll provide training for the student and sometimes even the technology like a smart pen for note-taking. And then my piece is to work with that student on the accommodations to use something like a smart pen. We've worked with local school systems to provide transition fairs for high school students with disabilities. So those are two examples of partnering with community agencies. And then system-wide, we have some fantastic resources here in Georgia. We work a lot with the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. They help us with alternative textbooks, screen reading software, tools for life. I could go on and on about their products and services to our students. We're also part of the Regents Center for Learning Disorders Advisory Committee for Disability Services. For example, during COVID-19, the advisory committee formed a subgroup to address the unique needs of individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. This included researching the different types of clear masks to make sure that we would get a product that would meet CDC guidelines, but also allow necessary visibility for communication for this population. The Board of Regents worked with our group to place a bulk order for clear masks for any institution that needed assistance to procure them. And as an institution that serves around 6,000 students, we're a smaller school, and that was really very helpful for us. And we appreciated that working together. So these are just some examples of how we partner with others. So the takeaways that I hope you will have from my presentation today is that one size does not fit all when it comes to accessibility, and teamwork is key across departments, schools, programs, campuses, and the USG. This will help us provide accessibility for college students with disabilities at any of our institutions. And this concludes my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. We probably do have time for just a question or two if anybody has them right now. You can go ahead and type any questions that you have into the chat, and we can either answer them now, or Kim can address them as we move on to the next section of the presentation, or we can circle back around to them later. I'm not seeing any questions right now. Let's go ahead and move on then to the next presentation, which will be from Jeff Gallant and Tiffany Reardon from Affordable Learning Georgia, and it's going to be around accessibility and open educational resources creation. Jeff Gallant is the program director of Affordable Learning Georgia. Just let me mention that Affordable Learning Georgia is an initiative of Galileo and the university system. Jeff directs the implementation of strategies and activities identified for increasing the affordability of course materials within the USG, including grants programs, pilots, partnerships, collaborative projects, data collection and analysis, and the website and repository management. Jeff often represents Affordable Learning Georgia externally at meetings, conferences, and site visits, and he served as a mentor in the Spark Open Educational Leadership Program since its inception. Tiffany also works for Affordable Learning Georgia. She's the program manager. She works with Jeff on grants as well, but also specifically works around institutional advocacy teams, professional development, and accessibility implementation. She is a member of the Open Education 2020 Conference Steering Committee, on which she is managing the accessibility efforts for the virtual conference, in addition to other committee duties. Tiffany's background is in instructional design and technical communication. She worked at Kennesaw State University for 5 years as the CHSS instructional designer, and has been teaching introductory technical writing for 4 years, first at KSU and now at Texas Tech University. So I think, Tiffany, you're going to start off, so go ahead.
Okay, so let me pull up my screen share. And all right, let me pull that up. Okay. Okay, so hi everyone. So thank you for introducing us. Sorry. Never fails.
I'm sure they'll settle down here in a moment.
He's going to get her, sorry. All right, so we're going to talk to you about accessibility and open educational resource design. But before we jump into that, what is Affordable Learning Georgia and what are open educational resources? So OER, open educational resources, that's what we'll typically refer to them as our OER throughout the rest of this presentation, are freely available teaching and learning resources that can be shared and customized by anyone through an open license. So they'll include open textbooks and open ancillary materials, and they often include more as well, but these are probably the more common materials, really anything educational. Affordable Learning Georgia is a USG initiative to reduce the cost of course materials to students, contributing further to educational equity and student success, and OER is part of that initiative. So we're not going to, I mean, I could talk your ear off about OER and ALG, but that's not the purpose of this presentation. So if you do want to learn more, you can always go to our website to learn more about that, or just contact us. That's fine too. But why is accessibility so important to OER specifically? So we've already heard about why it's important in general for education, but it's also really important to the openness of materials. So let's say you create an open textbook, it's open to download, it's open to change, revise, remix, it's open to use, but that doesn't really make it totally open, does it? So accessibility makes it open to anyone to use, regardless of ability. So it fights discrimination in access for people with different abilities. And those, and that could include physical abilities, it could include mental abilities. And there's such a huge range of abilities that accessibility works to include that it's important to not think of the standard, the basic things that we typically jump straight to, like seeing and hearing abilities. ALG has been trying to improve our accessibility as part of that. So there has been a push to increase accessibility overall. It's not a new concept, but there is a newer push towards it. And so ALG is working on that as well. So some of the retroactive things we're doing, trying to make what we have already more accessible. We have implemented a new repository, OpenALG, and we have /manifold here because that's who powers it. That repository is both accessible and interactive and makes it, creates a path for us to make our current materials more accessible and also to help new materials be accessible. So it creates an easy path to create new accessible materials. We also did a complete needs assessment of all the materials that we already had and started a slow conversion of all of those materials to accessible Word or HTML versions as we're moving things into Manifold. It created this big, gigantic to-do list for us. So that's what we're working on. And then we also started a partnership with the UNG Press to have them help us get accessible versions of the OER that they have created so that we can put them in Manifold as well. Proactively, though, we are also trying to make our future stuff more accessible. So a few different ways that we're doing that, and they all really revolve around the support that is available for accessibility. So we have new tutorials, so accessibility support tutorials that are available and open to use. We have a new requirement that grant-funded materials have to be created with accessibility in mind, and we've improved our training for those grantees. And then we have also put new training in place for our institutional champions who are on-campus advocates for ALG. And then we've also got some other new ideas in place, like we're looking at the possibility of creating an evaluation rubric and expanding that professional development. So how much is enough when it comes to accessibility? So it's a strict checklist doesn't, it's not enough to just say, here, do all of these things, and then you'll be perfectly accessible. It's not a binary switch. So accessibility is a spectrum. We need to think about it in more ways than just accessible, non-accessible. But some ways that you can, there are some very basic ways that you can create your materials to be more accessible from the start, and then start exploring some of the more advanced, ambitious stuff with your disability services offices or with the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. So the rest of the session is going to be sort of giving you some tips for how to do that, the basic stuff at least. So first tip with Microsoft Word. So our first couple tips are going to be with Microsoft Word. And the first one, structure your document. And I think that we all think we're structuring our document, at least from a visual standpoint. But it's important to use the styles feature in Word for structure. So the styles feature in Word and in other tools that have similar features, it allows screen readers to jump between different sections. So it's going to allow a student or another reader to use their screen reader to get to chapter 12 without having to listen to the entire textbook before they get to chapter 12. It's also going to help them stay oriented where they are in the textbook though. So it's going to read them as headings as they go. It's going to read that structure as they read to help them stay oriented within the book where they are in the book. You don't have to use the default styles that come with Word. I mean, there are lots of different ways to change the way it looks. So you can still create that sort of visual aesthetic that you want, as long as you're thinking about, how color use and things like that. But it's important that you do that within the styles feature so that you're also getting that structure. You also want to think about lists in Word. So when you are using lists, it's tempting to, just hit the little dash on your keyboard and start typing and then enter and add another dash. And sometimes that's fine. So Word does have an automatic list function that will sometimes, if it's set up correctly, or, if it's still set to its default, it'll create that list for you automatically. And that's fine. But to have a little bit more control over that, it's important that you're using the bullet and the numbered list icons in Word, because that will tell you for sure that I have created this list correctly. And this is not on the slide here, but it's also important to think about how you're using them and if you're using them for the right type of list. So you typically want to use numbers for a list that needs to go in a particular order, and then bullets for a list that doesn't need to go in any particular order. Tables are all kinds of complicated when it comes to accessibility, but a couple things to keep in mind are to make sure that you are designating headers in your tables. So there's a checkbox in Word that is checked by default usually, but you also need to designate that row to repeat as the header row on each page. And you can do that by right-clicking on the header row and then click Table Properties. And then there's another checkbox there that says repeat as header row on every page. So that's important. The other important thing to think about with tables, though, is to make sure you're using them correctly as tables with tabular data in them. So it used to be really common in the early HTML days to use tables to put like a picture next to text. And that's fine. Like that, that creates that visual it creates the vision that you want, but it's not accessible. So it's going to confuse a screen reader. It's going to make the reader think that they're getting tabular data when actually it's just like an aesthetic that you've done. So you want to avoid that and only use tables for actual tabular data and use other features for visual page arrangement. Links are also important. And this is really for, we've got this listed here as Word, but this is something you can apply to everything. And all of these tips are, but you want to think about what the link actually reads. So a screen reader is going to read, if you put a URL into your document, it's going to read that URL exactly as it's displayed. And that's not always helpful. So sometimes these URLs are like gobbledygook, and it's just going to, it's nobody knows where it's going because they're trying to listen to it and process it at the same time. So you can highlight the text that you want the hyperlink to be connected to. So if let's say you want to go to the Creative Commons homepage, as we have here, you would type that in, highlight that text, and put the hyperlink in there as an actual descriptive text hyperlink. Some people will highlight the word link, and that's probably a little bit, it's less confusing than highlighting just the URL, but it's not accessible still because it's not telling them where that link is going. So it's important to make sure that your descriptive text is describing where that link is going to go. And in everything accessibility text, accessibility tip, alternative text. So in any tool that you're using, you want your images to be interpreted by the screen reader correctly. So the image itself, so the screen reader can't look at an image and say, okay, let me describe what this is. It's not advanced enough for that. So what you can do is put alternative text on that image for the screen reader to read in place of it. There is a little checkbox that says this is decorative information. You can check that, but it's only helpful and it's important to only use that decorative image checkbox to actually designate truly decorative images. So images that have no value beyond making the page pretty. And sometimes you may still want to include include an alternative text for decorative images. Maybe that's how, maybe it won't be distracting to the person using the screen reader. If it might still be helpful, it's better to include the alt text. It's also worth noting that a lot of the time we put captions in under our images. So we might have figure 1 with a description of that image below it. If that text in your caption is sufficient for alternative text, that's fine. You probably don't want to put it in twice because the screen reader is going to read it twice. So you would use that, you would allow it to read the caption instead of putting the alternative text. You're still going to be flagged though if you do that. So if you use an accessibility checker, it's going to say, hey, you don't have alternative text. But you have the caption in there. However, if you have a caption in there that's not actually describing the image, maybe it's only in there to put in a citation, then you still want to put that alternative text in. You still want to make sure that that information is there for the reader. For PDFs, okay, so I think that the educators have been trained fairly well to use PDFs because it avoids changes being made to a document after download and students getting confused by that. And that's fine. You can still use PDFs. It's possible to make PDFs accessible. Create them in Word first. So if you create them in Word first, you can use all those accessibility features we just talked about and then save it as a PDF. And that PDF will save all of those features as long as you save it correctly, as long as you have these checkboxes checked. So convert document information, enable accessibility and reflow with tagged Adobe PDF, create bookmarks, convert Word headings to bookmarks. As long as those things are checked, that accessibility stuff you did in Word will carry over into the PDF. There may still be a couple of minor things that you can fix that may need to be fixed when you run the accessibility checker, but they'll be pretty simple, basic things. I think the title always gets flagged in PDF. But I will say my own 2 cents here. Seriously consider leaving it in Word and giving it to your students in Word, because a lot of the time those Word versions are easier to use with some of their assistive technology than the PDF is. But the other important thing to keep in mind about that is to just communicate with your students. If they need a particular format, be willing to work with them on that. If it's going to work better for them in PDF versus Word, then, maybe work with them on how to get them the correct, the version that they need for their technology. And I'm actually going to pass this over to Jeff for the rest of the presentation.
Okay, so one thing I'm going to add in chat before I go on, because I've only got about 4 minutes and I'm just going to close this out real quick. We have demonstrations for you here on our own OneDrive. So you can download an exercise sheet. You can also download a Word demo file and a PowerPoint demo file that work with that exercise sheet. So it's kind of like if you did something on Lynda or LinkedIn Learning back when we had that one, they'd have the exercise files on the side. That'll really help you out here in putting some stuff into action. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. Yep, here we go.
And Jeff, I'll just mention you can take an extra couple minutes if you need to. We're slightly ahead of schedule.
Sure. So we are doing this kind of presentation to get a general overall accessibility going for this. So we're not looking at a particular application. We're not looking at a particular screen reader. We're saying here are the most common things that you are probably going to use as a faculty member when you're creating instructional resources outside of D2L, which Jeff Linock will be talking about a little bit after this. But what we really want to focus on here is making sure that just about anything that needs to make something machine readable has a machine readable file. And PowerPoint's no different from Word. If you're using PowerPoint and you start out a slide, usually you have the choice. You could create a blank slide and then just add all of your stuff and be very creative and artistic, or you can use their own layouts. And I would suggest using their own layouts. It's just like with styles. Microsoft knows what a title is. It knows what a text box is. It knows this image content thing you're going to add on the side if you use the layouts, and it knows which order to put those in. Well, we'll put the title first, then we'll go to this left one, then we'll go to this right one, and then we're going to move on. If you just put in a text box here and it's really cool, and then you put a picture here and you think that everything's going to just read the way that it's supposed to, you might look at the outline of the PowerPoint and realize that everything's out of order. Using layouts means that you do not need to do all of this manual checking that can take a ludicrous amount of time. So if you want to start making something accessible in PowerPoint, use the layouts first. The cool thing about this is that you can use the design ideas feature in Microsoft's PowerPoint now, and we used it for this presentation kind of as a demo. We just started out with those white boxes that you usually see, subject heading and just the text box, and that's it. But when we hit design ideas, it gave us these layouts where it knows the layout and it makes it look cool. So check that out if you want to make accessible and good looking stuff at the same time. Use the Slide Master if you want to fix any color or font issues. There are a ton of inaccessible fonts out there, particularly ones that are script, cursive, Old English, graphic. That kind of stuff is not as readable as everything else. So if you want to fix all your fonts at once, use the Slide Master. Take the default font and change it to something accessible. If there is a problem with your color contrast between the background and the text, all you got to do is fix it in the Slide Master. You click View, you go to Slide Master, and that's it. You're probably hearing my dog play with something right now. That's okay. Okay, so PowerPoint, that's the kind of big tips you need to know. When it comes to videos, try to script it. If you're scripting a video, you're going to have your transcription ready to go. Maybe you'll have a couple of words off here or there. You can fix that in the resulting transcription. But what you can do then is, let's say you're going to host it in YouTube, you can add that script to the English subtitles caption box, and YouTube will read exactly where that is and work out the timings, and you'll have a suddenly accurate video with all of the captioning ready to go. When it comes to like the details, for example, here's a block of silence where nothing happens, and you said one thing and then you're going to say another thing, YouTube can't read that silence and stop where the captions are. So that's one thing to keep in mind, but it's not that big a deal. Most of the time, all of the information is going to be very accessible just by having that script. If you don't have a script, try to wait for the auto captioning to process in YouTube when you're uploading it, and then take all those captions, put them in a Word file, fix the captions, bring them back over like you've got a script. You don't want to make it public before that happens, but at least you've got some sort of AI-driven transcription to help you get started. Otter AI also does the same kind of thing. It's very focused on speech to text. It's a good thing to check out. Accessibility checkers are very helpful, but they're also very literal. So if you find that you have a couple of items in your accessibility checker that says these are inaccessible, use your knowledge to see whether or not this is truly inaccessible to your students. For example, Tiffany had mentioned how there are sometimes where you have an image with alt text and then you have the captions that describes exactly what the alt text would do. You need the caption down there. For everybody else, you might stick with the caption and make an executive decision on that part. So you don't have to have 100% good file in the accessibility checker. It can be good, but even 100% in the accessibility checker doesn't make it accessible. There are many different considerations you can have in mind. For the web, check out a couple of these tools. Right now, because I'm presenting, I'm not sharing the links out. I was sharing the links earlier, but you can Google these very easily. The Wave Evaluation Tool is a comprehensive accessibility checker for the web. Colorblindly simulates what it looks like for someone who has a particular variance of colorblindness, so you can check what the contrast means. This is included in Wave. So if you want to go just full comprehensive, check out the Wave Evaluation Tool. It's a little plugin you can add into Chrome. And EPUB, if you are making an EPUB, which is usually a very mobile-ready reader, the DAISY Consortium, which is all about accessibility, has an EPUB validator to make sure that you have the correct and accessible structure for that EPUB. This is a lot, so you're not going to be able to remember all of this, but we do have our accessibility guides, which we shared in the chat a little bit earlier. These are kind of quick need-to-know guides for faculty creators to get your stuff generally accessible. And as we said, accessibility is an entire spectrum. It depends on the individual. Consult your disability services office, consult CIDI if you have some advanced accessibility things that you need to do. And of course, I already mentioned our exercises. I just want to close it out real quick. Thank you very much. As always, we are reachable at jeff.galan@usg.edu and tiffany.reardon@usg.edu. If you have any ALG/open educational resource questions, reach out. We would love to hear from you. Thank you very much. And I am going to stop sharing my screen and transfer it over to Jeff. Linock. I'm also Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, let me take a moment and introduce Jeff. I don't see any questions coming in the chat for Tiffany and Jeff Gallant, but again, feel free to add those in now and they may be able to address them as we go on, or we can circle back around to them. Our final speaker for today is Dr. Jeff Linock. He is the Director of E-Learning and the Professor of Mathematics at Georgia Highlands College. He is GHT's primary E2L administrator and serves on the Georgia Review Functionality Group and the Regents Advisory Committee on Distance Education, which he has also chaired. He was a member of the USG's New Learning Models 2030 Task Force, a team member on a Round 2 Affordable Learning Georgia grant project, and a consultant to the USG's Math 1113 Empirical Model Project. Jeff has trained faculty in various aspects of developing and teaching courses in distance formats and has helped guide the initial stages of GHT's Quality Matters process. He has made presentations related to teaching with distance learning technology at several conferences. Prior to coming to GHC, Jeff was an active faculty member at St. Petersburg College, serving on the SPC Executive Board, and as the principal faculty member responsible for leading SPC's Quality Enhanced Plan. Jeff holds a doctorate in higher education from Nova Southeastern University, a Master of Mathematics from the University of South Florida, and a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from Vanderbilt University. Take it away, Jeff.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind introduction and the introduction. And you've heard a lot of great stuff this morning, and I know sometimes that can be overwhelming as you hear this. And feel free to go back and look at the recording. That I think is quite helpful for folks to do that. That's one of the advantages of technology these days, is that we can go back and look at those recordings. Okay, so I want to talk about accessibility from the technology side. You've heard several things here this morning about that. But to start with, I want to just kind of give a summary here of what is accessibility really about. And really, it comes down to a few points. First of all, it's about student success. That's what the Momentum year started as. That's what the Momentum approach is, about student graduation, student success. It's also about quality education for all students. Again, that's part of our initiatives here in the University System of Georgia at all of our institutions. We want to give our students a quality education. It's also about the fact that it's the right thing to do. We look at things and say, okay, we want to have student success, so we want a quality education, but it's also the right thing to do. And this leads into the universal design for learning, the principles of the universal design for learning. And that, just to give a quick summary of this, the three guiding principles are to provide multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression for students. And I've got a link here, and we can gladly share that out after this presentation. And I gladly share out the presentation to get to those links. But I want to give a word about universal design for learning and technology. And I've got a quote here from the CIDI, and it says, sometimes inclusive or universal design is not enough to meet the needs of an individual with a disability. So we've got to be careful about that. As we said, there's not necessarily, as Kim said, and Tiffany and Jeff alluded to, there's no one size fits all necessarily for everyone. And so I want to talk with you here about adaptive technology. And so I'm going to rely on the Adaptive Technology, Adaptive Computer Technology Center from the University of Missouri's definition of what adaptive technology is. It's special versions of already existing technologies or tools that provide enhancements or different ways of interacting with technology. All right, so that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about using Word, using PowerPoints, using PDFs, and using the tools within those that already exist to help us make things accessible. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that here with regard to D2L in just a second. Under adaptive technology, depending on who you talk to, you will hear the word assistive technology. Assistive technology is really technology that's geared more specifically towards a disability. For instance, a JAWS reader. If you're not familiar with JAWS, think about a wheelchair, electric wheelchair for a person who maybe has severe mobility issues. So that's designed specifically for that particular disability. And whereas adaptive technology is things that we're already using that we're gonna say, okay, now let's put a feature within that technology that we can actually use and make it so that this technology is accessible to folks who need those accommodations. All right, we have adaptive technology already in place. And so I wanna stress that. We're at a school, Georgia Hollins is a state college. We have, as Kim alluded to, about 6,000 students. During the pandemic, that's fluctuated a little bit so we have to face the reality of limited resources as far as budgetary resources and personnel resources. So we look many times to say, what do we have that we can use to work with our students with disabilities? And Brightspace D2L is one of those that obviously most all institutions throughout this University System of Georgia are using and have. And within Brightspace, there's some really great features and that you can utilize. One of them is that Brightspace puts out a set of HTML templates, and I highly recommend those. I highly recommend just clicking on the next item, the accessibility checker in D2L as you use those or as you place other items in there. The nice thing about the templates is that the code is written for them. The templates have good instructions in them and define what each component does for the faculty members as they want to use them. So it's really a self-contained package that really needs a little training, but really if any faculty member who has really got the initiative can jump in there and use those. The advantage of those is is that there is an accessibility checker in D2L. Now that accessibility checker checks HTML pages, and in D2L that's designated as a web page. If you upload a Word document, a PowerPoint, a PDF in there, you'll have to do that checking outside of D2L. All right, so because those documents such as Word and as I mentioned are what's known as rendered in D2L. There's a third-party process behind them that queues up your Word document as students click on it. And so one of the advantages of using the HTML template is you don't have that delay. Sometimes if you have a long PowerPoint or in there, students or even you as a faculty member, when you're loading things up, it'll say, this is rendering, it's taking too long. Do you want to download this? That can be a problem. That can be a little bit disturbing to some students. So that's why I encourage the use of these HTML templates. Also in D2L, there's the alternative text requirements for images. So when the faculty member goes to load up an image into D2L, it's going to ask them, do you want to put, you must put an alt text here, and what's that going to be? Now, the downside in D2L is that it gives them a little box about that long. So it makes it seem like it's got to be really short, which it doesn't necessarily fit what you may need to do for alternative text. The other downside in D2L that you have to be careful of is decorative images. As Tiffany already mentioned about decorative images, it's very easy to call something a decorative image, and that's almost too easy in D2L because there's a little checkbox there. You could check that off and say, oh, everything's a decorative image. Well, that's definitely not necessarily the case. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. There's the WCAG AA color checker. That's Web Accessibility Group's color checker in there. So if you're changing the color of the fonts, that's definitely something that faculty need to be aware of, that'll automatically pop up. And it's good for faculty not to ignore that. If they really prefer a font that color, a particular color for a font, then I would suggest that they consult the disability support specialist on their campus and say, hey, I want to try to use this color. This is telling me that it's not a good color. And ask, what's the issue here? All right, the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is video notes. Video Notes is a product within D2L. They also have a sister product called Audio Notes in D2L that allows faculty to and students to record videos up to 30 minutes in length. It has an automatic generation of captions. You have to select that though. It's an option on the videos. That captioning feature is something that I believe is relatively new in the last 6 months. And don't quote me on that. If I'm incorrect on that, I apologize, but I know it's a relatively new feature with written video notes. And one of the things about that, it does have the ability to go back in and correct the captions. It will show you the captions. Now, I say that if you have the permission to do that. So those who are faculty administrators out there, check with your D2L admin. And I always say it's an institutional decision. I want to make that clear. What we do at Highlands may be different than what you do at your institution. But we are working with this right now. We're actually in the process of testing some things with regard to video notes. And one of the limitations there, it's like I said, 30 minutes is the maximum video. Recently, I had a faculty member use a product that was basically a whiteboard, blackboard type of product. And a student had an issue with it. And so I went out and went to the product website and tried to find how do you close caption this product. Their website kind of indicated that they were possibly a company that had offices in the United States and different countries in the world. And probably the home country might have different accessibility rules. So I didn't find anything in there that allows us to close caption. So what I did is I went in with the instructor's permission, took that 26-minute video and loaded it into video notes to see what happened. Because I said, this is an opportunity. So I can see if that he can use that product to now caption these videos. Set it up. I knew that I had to, 26 minutes, it's not going to happen like over in 2 seconds. Okay, be patient. It's video notes, closed captioning, any closed captioning program. It's not like going to McDonald's where you can be pretty much guaranteed within 15 minutes you're gonna have your burger and fries and be out the door. So you know, I knew to let it go overnight, and so did that. Went back in and looked at the captions. Now it is something that definitely is going to need to be corrected, and so there's some systems that we have to work out here at Highlands, and others would have to work out. So, but at least it gives us a good product that's already there that we don't have to, may not have to consider buying something else or doing something else. Let's talk about alt text. And I want to play on what Jeff and Tiffany mentioned here and give an add-on to everything accessibility tip. Everything needs an alt tag image, alt text. Alt text training is important. I want to add that as kind of the 5th bullet of that. And here's why. The AIM, WebAIM group on accessibility made this statement in one of their articles. Of the best known guidelines is to provide alternative text for images in the alt attribution of the image, that in little brackets there, that's the tag for alt for text. If web developers learn only the guideline, but not the reason for the guideline, they may provide alternate text that is not helpful to the user users who need it. They may even create rather than solve accessibility barriers. So as Tiffany mentioned, sometimes if you put a caption in there, then it reads it twice in the you know, the screen readers will read things twice. This is something that you have to consider as far as why am I doing this? And these are some good resources out there to look at. Check with your Centers for Teaching and Learning too, to see what resources they have that can, and suggestion they can have about how to do the alt text, because it can be a little tricky. Speaking of a little tricky, I want to again play on something that they said and about revisit their retroactive accessibility at ALG. And particularly the statement, the slow conversion of all materials to accessible Word and HTML documents. I want to share with you my experience in round 2. And in round 2, Dr. Chattopadhyay and I were on a project and to convert some materials to a forum for physics. And he wanted to use the OpenStax textbook on this. And so I was looking at this and say, you know, we have ReadSpeaker, and one of the problems we saw with ReadSpeaker is that folks who put just links to textbooks, those textbooks aren't read. So my idea was, okay, I'll just pull this in and make that textbook, you know, just put the little segments of textbook into our D2L in the HTML format, and bingo, it'll read. The trouble is, did the first section of the text that we wanted, first chapter of the text, I went and clicked on ReadSpeaker. Well, I hit the alt text, and what did it do? It gave me the URL out there. So I had to go back in, and I have to go back in every one of those sections, go to the source document, pull out the alt text that OpenStax had, and then paste it into where it needed to be in the HTML. Now figure, you know, about, 10 to 15 chapters. That took a lot of time. Okay. So I want to give a shout out to them about those who are doing this, planning that out, and those who are converting things to HTML versions. It does take a lot of time, and so just to be patient with that process. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, I'm keeping an eye on my time here, so about identifying tools and resources. As I said, there's a lot of things within D2L that you can do. But I'm going to stress to ask your disability support specialists, your IT professionals, your D2L admins, your CETL staff, and your webmasters. A lot of people forget about their webmasters. We have 2 very good webmasters, Fred and Layla, and they have some really great skills. I actually meet with them every 2 weeks because we look at D2L as part of our web presence. So we discuss things, and I've learned a lot from them about different aspects of things. And that's a good resource for you to use. Attending this event is a good way to identify tools. A suggestion I have is when you get those vendors' emails, add them to your Excel spreadsheet of potential vendors. Sometimes it may not be something that's just geared towards accessibility. It may be another vendor and you're saying, oh, I'll just forget about that. But if you make up those a spreadsheet of this and put tabs at the bottom and different products, you can go back and say, if your school is looking for something, hey, I remember somebody sending me an email about that. It makes your life a lot easier. Also, look at the centers for teaching and colleagues at other schools. I regularly go back to my alma mater, Vanderbilt, and look at their Center for Teaching and Learning. One reason is because they use D2L. And so I kind of look and see what are they using over there. Now, of course, they're a school that's, got a significant endowment and has significant more resources than we have, but it gives you an idea of what other folks are doing. When I was making this presentation up and have looked before at University of Washington's Disabilities Services Office, they have really good materials there as well too, and talking to colleagues at other schools too, you get a good sense of what's going on. Do a state of the market analysis. Now, this is not necessarily a formal call for proposals. This is one where you have that list that you have and you say, okay, we're going to reach out to these folks and say, we're doing a state of the market. We're not looking to buy a product necessarily. We're just seeing what the nature of the products are out there. Okay, again, be very careful with this. I'm going to caution you, check with your business office, let them know you're doing this, make sure, because they'll guide you on the rules about what to do and what not to do. You got to be really careful that to be fair to everybody. But also in that state of the market, if there is a product you already are using, invite them into that. So there's some advantage to that. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Make sure you do a cost and risk analysis of the product as far as, is this product one that, is accessible? Is this product if not, if it's not fully accessible, what's the risk to the institution? That might be something you need to pass up the line. Remembering cost is not just how much it costs dollar-wise. Cost is the cost of you as the staff member or the faculty member learning this, implementing it, and using it over again. There's a time cost associated with that. So, keep that in mind. Okay, you need to ask the tough questions. This is tech tip number one for me. The question that I asked a lot and have asked a lot for quite a number of years now is, how does this product work for students, faculty, and staff who require accessibility accommodations? That's a critical question. I know we've been focusing on students, but we really have to also focus on faculty and staff. They're going to be the ones who are going to be implementing and using the product. If you have a faculty member who needs an accommodation and you've already purchased this project, because you say, yeah, it works for students really well, but it doesn't really work on their side of things really well, then you're going to have a product that could have challenges for you. If you look on this slide, I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but the next 5 items on the slide here, you'll notice these come from the USG vendor questionnaire from the USG Georgia View Group. That questionnaire is an extensive questionnaire, but these types of questions are things that you need to ask and that you need to train your faculty to ask when the publishers and other folks contact them. It's critically important. I want to give a shout out to the Georgia View Group, because those folks do an excellent job supporting us here in the University System of Georgia, and they up their game every year with regard to this vendor questionnaire and add things to it, and there's other parts to this on cybersecurity and all that, so we won't go there, but just use these types of resources. They're really good. With regard to integrating tools and resources, invite a diverse team to test the product out. We do that at Highlands. One of the advantages of being a small school is quite a number of us wear multiple hats. And so I ask Kim a lot. She'll say to me, hey, I got something going on. How do we do this? And so one advantage of being married is we're here like now, can have a discussion on this. So maybe my suggestion to all institutions, hire a married couple, one's accessibility support and the other as a faculty/IT person. Be realistic in your integration times. Realize that it does take time to integrate tools into D2L. Take advantage of beta testing. We beta tested Blackboard Alley. It's a product that takes a look and sees what issues you might have in certain aspects of D2L with regard to each of your classes. They actually, I believe, gave every institution in USG a short time where you could put it into your product for 6 weeks. We liked the product. We thought it was great. The downside was sticker shock. Okay, and that's some of the challenges we run into as a smaller institution. I'm going to wrap it up real quick here with 2 slides. Also, I want you to think about whether or not you need a flashlight with a wide view of things, or you need a laser with a focus view when it comes to technology and accessibility. With caution, give your vendors time to grow. D2L has grown to things, and as we go along, keep that in mind. Also know your institution's technology policies and standards. I'm sure that they contain an accessibility section. If not, maybe it's somewhere else. And do your faculty and staff know that those concerning the web apply to all your content that's hosted on your official college websites and all other websites, including D2L? So check out your college policies, and I always suggest look at how your college or university handles things. Okay, wrapping up here with deployment. Your technology system administrators need to be involved actually from the start. They can provide you a lot of guidance and a lot of help. Don't forget about your data students and trustees when you're deploying things. Those folks are responsible. So if there's a product that's, hey, this product's accessible, we think it's going to help, but that product is going to want to know the name of every student. That product's going to know specifically what their disability is, and so forth. You might have a problem with that product being compliant with FERPA and other things. And so the data trustees would be the ones who say yes or no to some things. Consider how you roll things out. Is it going to be a soft rollout, or is it going to be an all hands on deck? Hey, we need this product in there now. And then consider rolling things out and you're on a compliance training. One of the things I've tried to do is to up the game in that, and being director of e-learning, I've looked at that and said, hey, let's change from PDFs and PowerPoint slides to as much as we can to those HTML pages. Consider training. What training do you need now? What's going to be reoccurring, and by whom? And when it goes to training, definitely contact your CEDO folks and say, hey, here's a new product. We're going to need training on that. Here's how it's accessible. Here's the accessibility part. Maybe it needs something that is special for them. Don't hesitate to pull a product offline. If you're going down the road and that product has not lived up to its promise and is not accessible to students, that may pose a very significant risk to your institution. So you might have to say, we got to pull this down because some of our students can't get to it. But again, be careful with that and just talk to a lot of people before you do that. Okay, finally, I want to say one final statement, and I know I'm a couple minutes over time. I thank Kim for those 2 minutes. Accessibility, it's personal, okay? To each student, it's very personal. If that student can't access materials, that student's not a happy student. That's a student that feels discriminated against. Guide your faculty and staff and administrators to that personal experience. One of the best things that happened to me actually a couple weeks ago, right when I found out I was doing this presentation, we were reviewing a product, and before I could ask the question, the first meeting we had about this product, I had a faculty member bring up the question, is this product accessible? And I thought, yes, we at Highlands are doing something right here. It's getting through. And so that really just was really a great day for me with regard to that product and a review and the efforts that our CEDO and others here and Kim and the whole team here is doing at Highlands. And so I want to thank you. I'm Jeff Linick. There's my contact information if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. If anybody has any questions for any of the presenters, you can go ahead and put that in the chat, and we will get to it at that point once we see them. Hopefully you enjoyed your conversations in the breakout rooms. If you haven't already, remember to hit submit on that Google form so that we can see the answers that you put into your questions. Did anybody want to share anything from the breakout rooms? Anybody have any interesting accessibility issues that they had to face on their campus this year? Feel free to speak up, or you can put it in chat. Or any of the other topics that were prompts for discussion in the sessions?
Well, one big takeaway we had in our breakout group, I think, was yes, when we focus on teaching and learning and we focus on course materials, you don't have to look so much at the ADA and Section 508. That kind of stuff winds up going, well, we don't want to scare faculty away from making more accessible materials for the right reasons, for preventing unequal access to information. But ADA coordination is super important. There was an account of at least one person on their campus who usually deals with accessible teaching and learning, who was brought in to be the ADA person for a facilities thing, or for equipment, or for building a new building. And those are two very different kinds of accessibility fields, and different types of looks at compliance. So it was an interesting look at how those types of accessibility issues are still very important, and can even cause things like people having to work twice as hard just to be on time for a course if you're in an in-person place.
Damien, you want to say something?
I'm asking a question. I'm very new to the whole accessibility arena, and I do try with my courses based on what CTL workshops I've been to make these assignments and every course material I put up accessible. And I may have missed this because I joined the workshop late, but is there a way in D2L, let's say, for example, I've created my assignment and I've put up in D2L a Word document in my D2L assignment. Is there a simply click of a button that I can just go check for accessibility to see if this document that I've uploaded here for the students to look at is accessible?
Jeff Linock, do you want to take that one?
As far as the Word document itself, that would be prior to loading it. Prior to loading it, you'd go to your File menu, and when you go into File, there's the second box in the middle is it'll check for accessibility. So before you load it, that's really the best time to check it, because then if the word checker shows that there are problems, then the students are going to have problems with it. But anything that's loaded into D2L, realize that that document is just kind of like and this me holding up this piece of paper. It's just put in there, and there's a process that renders that so they can read the Word document. It's not an HTML file that's readable by the D2L checker. So yes, doing it before you put it in there is the best way to go.
So let me see if I got this right. So I've seen a lot of the resources where I can go to a web page and check my document. But you mentioned going to File. Is that file in my Word document?
Yes, in Word.
Okay.
And Word itself, as you have that document up, you can I'll grab one so I can. If you click on File, it should say it says Inspect Document, and then it says Check for Issues, and then you can choose to a couple different issues. And the second issue under Inspect Issues is the accessibility checker. And as Jeff Gallant mentioned, that sometimes if occasionally you'll get things that it may not be 100% perfect, depending on things change every day. So and that's one thing I like to stress, and especially when it comes to technology, and also with accessibility. I mean, there may be a student who your institution has never dealt with before, that type of disability. Kim can address that more as far as things she sees that unique cases that come in. But yeah, that would be the best way to check this document, is before you put it into D2L, a Word document.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. Any other questions from anybody? And Tiffany just put the link into the Affordable Learning Georgia Accessibility Checkers document as well. All right, well, we look forward to seeing the responses that you put into the Google Forms. If you happen to still have it open and are still working on it, feel free to add some more stuff and then hit submit when you get done with that. I want to thank everybody for your attendance and time today, and especially to our presenters, Kim Linock, Jeff Linock, and Jeff Gallant and Tiffany Reardon. Thank you so much. This was extremely informative.